On our channel, we talked a lot about alien visitors, but what if the real aliens live right under our noses? It's time to talk about such a strange creature. In the pitch-black depths of the ocean, where light has never reached, a mysterious predator awaits. What if I told you that life here, under crushing pressure and freezing temperatures, takes on forms we never imagined? Because that's the case in the Atacama Trench, a place of perpetual darkness and incredible secrets. Meet Dulcibella camanchaca, a creature so unique it could redefine our understanding of life in the deep sea. This predator, only 4 centimeters long, thrives in conditions that would crush most life. But that's not it. Studies show that its DNA and morphology belong to an entirely new genus. Captured from a depth of 7,902 meters using a specialized lander, only 4 specimens of Dulcibella have been retrieved. These amphipods, crustaceans without a carapace, have a special feature that makes them different from any other. Raptorial appendages, perfect for hunting prey. Before Dulcibella, it was thought that most creatures living under such extreme conditions were scavengers, feeding off other creatures' remains. But apparently that was not correct. And just like science fiction likes to remind us, there are hungry and unknown hunters waiting in the darkness. Collaborative studies between Chile and the United States have confirmed Dulcibella as a new species, adding a lot of valuable insights to our understanding, or lack of it, of deep ocean ecosystems. Oceanic trenches like the one of Atacama where Dulcibella lives are some of the most extreme environments on Earth. They are long, narrow depressions formed at tectonic plate boundaries where subduction zones pull one plate beneath another. Most are located in the Pacific Ocean, and the Mariana Trench holds the record as the deepest, plunging 10,900 meters below sea level. That's deeper than the height of Mount Everest. Have you ever heard the term the Challenger Deep? Well, that's the Mariana's deepest point, consisting of 3 basins. In the history of mankind, very few people dared to descend there. The first descent happened in 1960, when the bathyscaphe Trieste reached the bottom, with Don Walsh and Jacques Piccard on board. Later, in 2012, James Cameron became one of the few. Certainly, this filmmaker's passion doesn't end on the screen. He reached the ocean's deepest point after descending for more than 2 hours on board the Deep-Sea Challenger, a submersible that housed 180 onboard systems, including batteries, thrusters, life support, 3D cameras, and LED lighting. The pilot sphere, just large enough for 1 occupant, was Cameron's window into Earth's most alien realm. With every discovery, like Dulcibella camanchaca, we get closer to understanding these underwater realms and the life they harbor, where mysteries and dangers are abundant and still far from solved. Who knows what other mysteries thrive right under our noses?
Now, the Mariana Trench is the deepest and probably the most enigmatic place on Earth, whatever that means. Bizarre creatures, such as deep-sea anglerfish, frilled and goblin sharks, barrel-eyed fish, hatchetfish, live in a crescent-shaped trench in the western Pacific. Just 3 people have ever descended down the Challenger Deep in the southern end of the Mariana Trench. There, at a depth of almost 11,000 feet, vents are bubbling up carbon dioxide and liquid sulfur. Mud volcanoes erupt under the pressure 1,000 times greater than at the surface. And so, it's no place I want to go. So bye!
Get back in there.
Alright, since you clicked, yeah, you're about to visit places no less mysterious and creepy than the Mariana Trench. Your first stop is Mexico, the Yucatan Peninsula to be precise. See those bottomless sinkholes filled with crystal clear water? It's fresh water that overlies salt water seeping from the sea. The sinkholes are called cenotes. The Mayans believe these natural wells were the gateways to the underworld. Thousands of cenotes, created by collapsed limestone bedrock, form one of the world's longest underwater cave systems. You can easily get lost in this tangled, mysterious network. Now it's time to visit the Caribbean. There, you'll get to a depth of almost 8,000 feet to see the Von Dam vent field. The hydrothermal vents fire out streams of muddy, scalding water with a temperature reaching 400 degrees Fahrenheit. That's almost enough to bake a pizza. These mounds are made of talc, a substance you can find in baby powder. The Von Dam vent field is an oasis for odd species. One of those is kind of a creepy shrimp without eyes. Instead, they're equipped with patches of light-sensitive cells on their backs. Now, you don't have to travel far away. The next enigma on your list is also in the Caribbean. Just off the coast of Belize, there is a giant sinkhole. It's also blue. Yep, that's the Great Blue Hole. The thing is about 1,000 feet across and more than 400 feet deep. Once, a long time ago, this hole was a cave until rising waters filled it, making it collapse in on itself. The deeper you descend into the Great Hole's crystalline waters, the darker it becomes. You see tons of stalactite-filled caves, but don't even try to enter them unless you want to get hopelessly lost. Once you reach a depth of 50 feet, you notice the water shimmer. That's the invisible line dividing the sinkhole's salty top from the freshwater abyss. Time to get out of there. Who knows what you might come across in the murky depths? Your next destination is off the Pacific Northwest coast. Almost 500 streams of methane bubbles were discovered there several years ago. Because of the bubbles, the vents got the name champagne seeps, which sounds better than the fart spas. Scientists are still puzzling over this phenomenon. Where does the methane come from? Underwater cows? Why is its temperature warmer than that of the surrounding ocean? And most importantly, what would happen if you managed to light a match somewhere near a large bubble? Methane needs a highly flammable gas, and setting a methane bubble on fire, well, you get the picture. And now you're off to Iceland. The plan is to dive into Silfra, a fissure filled with pure glacier water. This 206-foot deep crack is the only underwater place on the planet where you can touch 2 continents at once. The deeper you go, the darker it becomes. The rocky landscape looks otherworldly. Divers who dare to visit this incredible place risk having their gear frozen, getting hypothermia, or not surviving whatsoever. After all, the water temperature in Silfra Fissure is about 35 degrees Fahrenheit year-round. Your next destination is Scotland. Okay, cue the bagpipes. If you dive in the Gulf of Corryvreckan, a narrow strait between 2 islands, you'll see massive underwater rocks and deep holes. They create the 3rd largest permanent whirlpool on the planet, the Corryvreckan Maelstrom. The water moves through the strait at breakneck speed. It hits the underwater rocks, and the place looks like a pot with boiling water. The waves created in the process sometimes reach a height of 15 feet, and you can still hear the roaring whirlpool from 10 miles away. It's believed the Corryvreckan Maelstrom has swallowed dozens of sailors over the centuries. They were caught unaware by the ferocity of this natural phenomenon and pulled underwater in the blink of an eye. Okay, enough bagpipes. Your adventures are getting more and more extreme. You're heading for Antarctica. There, in the Southern Ocean, you'll find the Ross Sea Ice Shelf. Say that 5 times real fast. Later, not now. It's roughly the size of Spain, with the ocean underneath containing as much water as the North Sea. Once, scientists drilled all the way down through this enormous chunk of ice. Imagine their astonishment when they found life in those extreme conditions. The researchers came across dozens of mysterious species not known before. The most unnerving were upside-down swimming fish and overturned sea anemones hanging in the frigid waters. Hopefully, bizarre places with a notorious reputation don't frighten you. Well, too bad, because you're about to visit the Bermuda Triangle. It's an area between Bermuda, Florida, and Puerto Rico where planes and ships seem to vanish in thin air. For the first time, this place attracted a lot of attention in 1945. That's when 5 U.S. Navy planes disappeared during training. Before radio contact was lost, the flight leader said, "We're entering white water. Nothing seems right." After that, the planes with 14 men flying them disappeared. Even scarier, a rescue plane with 13 people on board never came back as well. Some people believe the mythical city of Atlantis lies at the bottom of the triangle. They claim its inhabitants use extraterrestrial technologies to sink ships and crash airplanes. Others blame rare and unexplored natural phenomenon, for example, magnetic anomalies, or massive pockets of flammable methane gas. There we go again. Then, if a bolt of lightning ignited a giant methane bubble near a ship or a plane, this could probably make it sink without a trace, except the smell. But methane is found everywhere all over the world, and it never behaves this way. Some experts aren't sure there's a mystery to explain whatsoever. Lots of busy routes pass through this area. No wonder more ships and planes sink there than anywhere else. Now, prepare some warm clothes. You're heading for the north again. Your destination is Cape Desolation in Greenland. Nice place. In 2012, Canadian researchers were sampling the water in that area, and their equipment came back to the surface with pieces of coral attached to it. That's how a cold water coral reef was stumbled across. These unique pinkish corals can easily go without sunlight and live in strong currents 3,000 feet below the surface. Another unique spot you can't miss lies between Greenland and Siberia. The Gakkel Ridge is the deepest and most remote portion of the global mid-ocean ridge system. In some places, it reaches the depth of more than 3 miles. It's only natural the darkest corners of this underwater world remain unexplored. Fascinating chemical reactions happening at the bottom of the ridge produce hot fluids rich in minerals. They spew, like freshmen at a rush party, from seafloor vents. And since these vents are isolated from the rest of the ocean, they're hot spots for bizarre creatures found nowhere else in the world. Your next stop is just off the coast of Cuba. Circular columns, paved floors, symmetrical stone structures. That's what the Cuban underwater city looks like. What happened there? Why was a large city abandoned at a depth of more than 2,000 feet? Lots of people believe those are the ruins of a long-forgotten civilization. But scientists have their doubts. They claim the lost city is nothing but a natural phenomenon that appeared about 5 million years ago. The disc and donut structures often appear around the areas of the seafloor where natural gases break free. Again with the gases. When you come to visit the Sargasso Sea in the middle of the North Atlantic Ocean, you won't find its shores. Instead, it's surrounded by powerful ocean currents. These are the same currents that turn the sea into a gigantic convention for dense brown seaweed. In the 19th century, a French ship was discovered in the Sargasso Sea. Its sails were set, but not a single crew member was on board. This mysterious disappearance made people believe the seaweed was carnivorous. The Sargasso Sea is indeed a weird place. It's always eerily calm and unnaturally warm, even though it's surrounded by the churning, freezing waters of the Atlantic Ocean. Could one of these bizarre places become a home to the largest marine predator ever, the megalodon? The giant shark's teeth, some larger than an adult man's hand, have been found pretty much all over the world. But since these creatures preferred warm, shallow waters, they lived along the coastlines of all continents except Antarctica. In other words, it'd be a waste of time to search for the giant predator in the depths of the Mariana Trench, in Greenland, or in Mexican cenotes. But then, could it choose the waters of the Caribbean to hide from the hustle and bustle of the modern world? Don't get your hopes up. There's been no proof the megalodon does exist these days. It wasn't a shy, elusive animal, and still, no one has seen this shark lurking around recently. Not even near the fart spas.
Did you know that reports of strange object sightings are quite common? The British Ministry of Defense reports at least 100 UAP, unidentified aerial phenomena, sightings every year. That means there have been at least 2,400 reports in that country alone since the year 2000. A UAP is considered to be anything that cannot be immediately explained or identified. Usually, most reports find an explanation, such as atmospheric phenomena or known objects. However, the portion that remains unexplained is undoubtedly the most intriguing. Throughout history, there have been waves of sightings. One of the most well-known occurred in 1947, famously referred to as the flying saucer madness. That summer saw a flood of reports across the United States, with approximately 800 sightings that year alone. On that occasion, a local news story reported by a civilian pilot named Kenneth Arnold claimed to have seen disc-shaped objects traveling at speeds of around 1,200 miles per hour in a line of 9, passing over Mount Rainier. This was the first post-World War II sighting and is considered the report that marks the beginning of the modern UFO era. Returning to this century, there are at least 15 well-known cases. Let's examine some of the most striking examples. Number 1. The first case we'll look at has even sparked NASA's interest. It concerns the unexplained activity in a small town in the United Kingdom called Bonsall. Residents have reported and documented numerous cases of unexplained activity, earning it the nickname UFO hotspot. Reports range from silver shapes to strange lights in the sky. In 2001, Sharon Rowlands accidentally filmed a house-sized disc with colored lights around it. The video caught NASA's attention because it resembled an object spotted during a 1996 space mission. However, the only conclusion NASA reached was that the object was metallic and didn't match any known commercial or military aircraft. Number 2, this case is from 2004 and concerns the Tinley Park lights in Illinois, United States. Residents reported inexplicable lights in the sky, which were also seen in neighboring cities like Chicago. Witnesses claimed to have seen a triangular pattern of red orbs hovering over the town. Other witnesses stated that the lights displayed a range of colors, from amber to greenish yellow. Skeptics who saw the lights firsthand dismissed them as an elaborate prank, but no definitive explanation was found. The lights were seen twice that year and remain a mystery to this day. Number 3. The next case involves some of the most viewed footage of sightings. The unexplained videos from 2004, 2014, and 2015 recorded by pilots of the USS Nimitz and USS Theodore Roosevelt. The fighter jets managed to capture these strange flying objects using their infrared tracking cameras. In 2021, the Pentagon officially confirmed the authenticity of these recordings. Fighter pilot Commander David Fravor of the Nimitz stated that the object had been appearing for 2 weeks when he was called to investigate the case. The object appeared at an altitude of 80,000 feet, descended rapidly to 20,000 feet, and then hovered. Fravor reported seeing an oval-shaped object approximately 10 feet, 3 meters long flying over the ocean. He and other pilots accompanying him stated that they were able to observe the object for about 5 minutes before it disappeared. It was Commander Chad Underwood, in a second wave of investigation and equipped with an infrared camera, who managed to capture the first video showing the object's erratic movements. Number 4. This case occurred in 2006 and is known as the O'Hare International Airport sighting in Chicago. Around 4:15 p.m., 12 United Airlines employees and several witnesses outside the airport saw an unidentified flying object resembling a flying saucer. The object was hovering over gate C-17. It was also seen by pilots, airline staff, and mechanics. Witnesses described it as completely silent and dark gray in color, adding that it clearly wasn't a cloud. A witness claimed that the object shot upwards at incredible speed, leaving a hole in the clouds that quickly closed. Despite numerous testimonies from people shocked by what they saw with their own eyes, authorities refused to pursue an investigation, as the alleged craft did not appear on any radar. Number 5. This case was cataloged as the 2024 New Jersey drone sightings. Interestingly, the appearances occurred on both the east and west coasts of the United States multiple times. These large, unidentified drones were seen near residential areas, power plants, railways, highways, and critical infrastructure, such as ports, bridges, and police stations. Over 3,000 reports were collected, but investigators couldn't determine an explanation. The Department of Homeland Security stated that the drones were manned aircraft operating lawfully. At the same time, the federal government called for legislation and additional resources to address the drone activity. According to a legislative briefing, the drones were up to 6 feet, 1.8 meters in diameter, operated for 6 or 7 hours, often turned off their lights, acted in a coordinated manner, and evaded detection. They most certainly did not seem to be flown by hobbyists. To this day, the operators or points of origin remain unidentified, but official investigations attributed most of the drone sightings to manned aircraft or misidentifications caused by nighttime illusions. Some even suggested mass hysteria, recalling the notorious 1947 flying saucer madness. Which of these cases sent chills down your spine? Let us know in the comments. And if you're curious about the latest unidentified phenomena, don't miss our video on the FBI's recently published UFO documents.
Many terrifying animals live deep beyond the waves, like this vampire squid living 3,000 feet below the surface in almost complete darkness. This animal has a cloak like a vampire's. That's why it's called the vampire squid. Deep down at the bottom, it can't use ink to defend itself. So this animal has developed an unusual tactic. It glows slightly to scare away predators. If this tactic fails, the vampire squid can turn its body inside out, revealing tiny spikes. When you translate its scientific name, Vampiroteuthis infernalis, it literally means vampire squid from the nether. Despite its terrifying looks, it's a harmless ocean animal. This previous creature was not from space, but this object definitely is. Before Elon Musk found a way to reuse rockets, NASA would simply drop old ones after launching astronauts into space, most of the time in the ocean or deserts. In 2012, Jeff Bezos launched a mission to find the Apollo 11 rocket. They found it by using sonar, but it was in terrible condition. It was sitting on the bottom of the ocean, not far from the predicted site. They were able to rescue the engine and reconstruct 2 of them. The most famous lost city is Atlantis, but sadly, we still haven't discovered it. However, Heraklion was also just a myth until one British pilot saw something that looked like a city while flying over the Mediterranean Sea. He reported it, and 60 years later, a group of divers went there. They were shocked when they found an entire city underwater. It was loaded with artifacts that could tell us a lot about the history of the place. Now it's one of the best underwater archaeological sites in the world. It's believed that the rising sea caused the whole city to go underwater. The Titanic sank in 1912. The wreck was claimed to be officially discovered 74 years later. In reality, though, a fisherman found the Titanic 8 years earlier while fishing in the Atlantic Ocean. He was pulling out his net when he spotted a head stuck in it. Luckily, it was just a doll's head. Years later, after the fisher had passed away, his son sold the doll to a doll collector. She did a lot of digging and research on every person who had a porcelain toy on the Titanic. She found the owner of the doll. Ava Hart was on the Titanic and had a doll with her. Ava survived the catastrophe by a miracle, but her toy didn't. Hart even wrote about the doll in her journal, and every detail matched the toy found by the fisherman. The tripod fish lives deep in the abyssal zone, around 20,000 feet below the surface. It's adapted to such immense depths and uses its tripod fins to stay still on the bottom. This creature doesn't have big eyes, but even if it did, these eyes would be useless in the darkness. Instead, the tripod fish uses its fins like antennas to detect any movement in the water. This creature doesn't have much luck when it comes to its love life, so it had to develop unique tactics to reproduce. One fish can be both male and female. The next bizarre creature is the lizardfish. It has tons of razor-sharp teeth, a huge mouth, and really big eyes, which it uses for hunting. All this makes the animal look freaky. The lizardfish lives at depths of around 11,000 feet in the midnight zone, where there is zero light. This freak of nature basically eats everything it can fit inside its mouth, from small fish to other lizardfish. On the other hand, when they see other reptile fish, they probably fall in love instead, because finding mates at those depths is not an easy task. Like the tripod fish, the lizardfish can be both male and female at the same time. When you think of a river, you usually picture it on land. Still, nature is quite unpredictable, and it created a river flowing under the ocean in California. It's running at a depth of around 2 miles. This river has everything that an ordinary river has: sunken logs, trees, and rocks. And despite its uniqueness, it's not the only one in the world. There are also others in the Amazon and Greenland. A terrifying creature was discovered near Angola's coast by a remote operating vehicle. It looks like it doesn't have a head or a body. It was sitting at a depth of around 4,350 feet below the surface. After doing research, scientists concluded it wasn't anything from a sci-fi movie, it was just a cluster of siphonophores stuck together. In 2015, some random guy was diving in Caesarea, and something shiny caught his eye. He reached out, grabbed it, and realized it was a gold coin. After that, he examined the bottom and found out that there were many more. He reported the incident to the local authorities, and they concluded that he had found Arabic treasure. The coins were made of solid 24-karat gold and were a few thousand years old, but due to the perfect salinity and temperature, they looked brand new. The coins belonged to a ship carrying cargo. It was caught up in a storm and unfortunately sank. One of the weirdest things ever discovered was found in the Baltic Sea. It's an anomaly that looks as if it was created by a different civilization. It was discovered by Swedish researchers, and they basically had no idea what it was. They had to ask tons of other scientists for their opinions. When you look at this formation from above, it's 200 feet long and looks exactly like a fallen spaceship. It's hard to believe that it's a natural formation, but spoiler alert, it's totally made by nature because the Baltic Sea has gone through many erosions throughout history. Most likely, the bizarre formation is the result of these processes. A group of divers in Madagascar were shocked when they found this 7-foot monstrosity of a knife on the seafloor. The speculation started immediately, and many said that the knife was from some giants that had fought megalodons and lived on Earth thousands and thousands of years ago. That could make a nice story, but the knife is most likely a movie prop that was lost at sea. One of the ocean's most bizarre animals is the frilled shark. It's believed that this fish is the reason for all those sea serpent stories that sea explorers of the past wrote about. These animals live pretty deep in the ocean, but sometimes they can be seen in shallow waters. It's super rare, but possible. The frilled shark has a big mouth sporting around 300 teeth. It also has a long body that looks like a lizard's, and it is truly a unique species of shark. Its prey can be half of its size because this shark's stomach is like that of a snake, and it can swallow huge fish or crustaceans. Spotting a few worms in your garden is no big deal, but after seeing a 26-foot long one in the ocean, you will make your wetsuit a little wetter. This worm is super rare, and it's completely harmless to humans. It's actually not a giant worm. It's a cluster of zooids that are stuck together in a worm-shaped formation. They usually only eat plankton, bacteria, and other tiny things that can be found in the ocean. Probably the scariest thing in the ocean that is 100% real is the magna pinna, which can be found at crazy depths of 20,000 feet below the surface. This monster looks like an underwater Slender Man, but it's just a squid with really long tentacles that can reach a terrifying size of 8 feet. This guy has only been seen a few times, and basically, we don't know much about this creature so far.
In the past 30 years, scientists have made an incredible discovery of a new creature living deep beneath the surface of the ocean, and the name of the creature is the harp sponge. Now, if you're wondering why it took so long to come across this animal, then I might have the answer. These creatures typically hang out at a depth of roughly 11,100 feet beneath the ocean's waves. This sponge species was first discovered off the coast of California thanks to a robot that was sturdy enough to explore those crazy depths the ocean has to offer. This is no doubt an area of the planet where even the most benign-looking creatures can be potentially dangerous. But even scientists were surprised to find that this creature was more than just a sponge. Now, this might seem obvious, but the harp sponge got its name because its basic structure, referred to as a vein, is the same shape as a harp. Each vein is made up of a horizontal branch supporting several parallel vertical branches. But don't let the harp sponge's fanciful and amusing appearance or its non-intimidating name fool you. Yeah, the harp sponge is very much a deep-sea hunter. It has a unique ability to capture and envelop small animals using its rhizoids, short, thin fibers. With their help, the harp sponge clings on to the soft muddy bottom and catches tiny creatures that get swept into its branches by deep-sea currents. Uh-oh. Other sponge creatures often feed by pulling bacteria and bits of organic matter from the seawater and filtering them through their bodies. But not our harp sponge. Instead, it snatches its future meal with minuscule barbed hooks that cover each of the harp sponge's branches. Now, harp sponges prefer tiny crustaceans like crabs, crayfish, shrimps, and prawns. Once the harp sponge has one of them in its clutches, it envelops the animal in a thin membrane before slowly beginning to digest it. So, pal, what's eating you? Oh, Harpo? Too bad. Researchers believe that harp sponges use this method of feeding because there aren't enough nutrients that deep down. This makes traditional filter feeding less effective. Research has shown that the creature is still in the process of evolving. Early harp sponges researchers found only had 2 veins, but later scientists discovered other harp sponges that had 6 veins. The harp sponge might have evolved this elaborate candle holder-like structure to increase its surface area. In general, harp sponges typically grow up to a length of 1 foot, but researchers have seen a creature that was 2 feet in length. The harp sponge is not only very unusual, but also beautiful to look at. See those tiny white balls on top of the branches? Now, why don't we look at some other creatures that live below the photic zone of Earth's oceans? The photic zone means the area beneath the ocean's surface that still receives some sunlight. Thanks to this, there are loads of different creatures and organisms living there. Any animal living beyond this layer qualifies as a deep-sea creature. The Tomopterus worm is a segmented worm you can find in the twilight zone of the ocean. This is the area that lies between 650 and 3,300 feet beneath the surface. These creatures are often no more than 1 inch long, but the largest of them can grow up to 1 foot. While swimming around and feeding, these worms do what researchers describe as an amazing smooth dance. That's because the creatures can swim extremely quickly and maneuver at tight angles with ease. Now, I know most people hear the word worm and think of the common earthworm, so it's quite interesting to know there's a deep-sea worm out there that never leaves the water during its entire life. Similarly, most of us try to avoid jellyfish that either rest on the sand or sit on top of the ocean waves. This isn't the case with a chrysota jelly. That's a deep-sea creature too. This beautiful jellyfish is mostly ruby red, bright orange, or electric purple. That's what helped researchers realize they had found a new species of jellyfish. The creature grows to a maximum size of 1 inch across. It has tentacles that stretch out in every direction. Now, if you come close to this jellyfish, it'll pull all these tentacles in toward its body before rapidly swimming away to avoid danger. Yes, you are dangerous. The chrysota jelly is extremely rare. You won't see it very often. You might need to borrow that deep-sea diving robot I mentioned earlier. While worms and jellyfish might seem quite harmless, this isn't the case with the Pacific viperfish. Ooh. This creature is equipped with a noticeably big mouth, like me, and the needle-like teeth inside are key to its hunting strategy. Pacific viperfish live at around 5,000 feet below the ocean surface, but they're among those numerous marine animals that migrate each night from the ocean depths toward shallower waters to dine. What's on the menu for dinner tonight? Lots of small fish and shrimp. The creature can grow up to 12 inches in length. Its 2 front fangs, which stick up from the fish's bottom jaw past its own eyes, are especially dramatic. When the fish unhinges its jaw, its mouth can open wide enough to engulf smaller animals, and the teeth form a cage to prevent an escape. Now, have you ever seen an underwater creature that looks like a strawberry? Trust me, it does exist. Just look at these dots on the strawberry squid. The creature has a big eye and a smaller one. You might think this unconventional pairing would be awkward and uncomfortable, but it's actually the opposite. The big left eye looks upward. It spots shadows cast by other animals in the dimly lit waters above. The eye's tubular shape helps it collect as much light as possible. On the other side of the squid's head, you can see its right eye. It's small and looks downward. This eye searches for flashes of bioluminescence produced by animals lurking in the darker waters below. Now, bioluminescence means the production and emission of light by living organisms. By the way, the squid has a nickname. And no, it's not Squiggy, although that's a great one. It's known as the cockeyed squid. This is simply due to the remarkable difference in size between its two eyes. I think I like Squiggy better, and so it goes. Since light doesn't reach the deep sea, the strawberry squid's body actually looks black. This helps the creature hide from enemies, such as sharks and dolphins. In general, the strawberry squid grows to a length of 5 inches. It typically lives around 3,000 feet below the surface, but floats to shallower waters at night. Now, the feather star is a marine creature without a backbone, but with feather-like arms that radiate from the center of its body. These creatures first appeared around 200 million years ago. Related to sea stars, they look like a flower, but if you approach them, they'll quickly swim away. But not all feather stars can swim. Many species can only crawl along the bottom of the seafloor. Like some of the other deep-sea creatures we've looked at, the feather star can adapt to its surroundings. It has a creepy ability to shed its arms, the same way some lizards can shed their tails. This also helps them escape from their enemies. Feather stars live all across the globe, from the equator to the poles, from the shallow waters on top of reefs to the deep, deep sea. Now, given that we're dealing with mysterious creatures, the name of this one is quite fitting. The swift vampire squid should be the official symbol of life in the deep sea. The animal has a dark red body, huge blue eyes, and a cloak-like web that stretches between its 8 arms. This, along with its name, may suggest that the creature is some form of a terrifying hunter. In reality, though, the vampire squid is a soft-bodied, timid creature, about the size, shape, and color of a football. It grows to roughly 12 inches in length and lives 3,000 feet below the waves. There's almost no oxygen there, but also relatively few predators. Whew, I think I'll need to decompress from this one.
It was April 10, 1912. Richard had just departed from Southampton, England, aboard the most famous ship of the time, dubbed the Unsinkable. Since he had just witnessed a near collision with the SS City of New York, he decided to write to his wife and report the unfortunate and frightening event. "My dearest Sal," he wrote, "we got away yesterday after a lot of trouble." Little did he know that a mere 4 days later, both his pen and the ship he was on would be lost forever at the bottom of the North Atlantic Ocean. Was this some sort of bad omen? Did Richard actually foresee what was about to happen to the ship he was on? In case you haven't figured it out by now, Mr. Richard Geddes was aboard the Titanic on the day that he wrote the letter to his wife. On April 14, 1912, the ship seemed to have been lost forever. Along with it, so many secrets and treasures have settled at the bottom of the ocean. It took until 1985 for the Titanic's wreck to be finally rediscovered using state-of-the-art sonar technology. Ever since then, they've managed to recover thousands of items from the Titanic, and many of them went on display or auction. Things like jewelry, a life jacket, a menu from the ship's restaurant, or even a sample square of carpet from the first-class stateroom have all captivated the public's attention, just like the many stories of the people on board. Scientists have even tried to come up with strategies to get the Titanic back up altogether to properly study it and stop it from getting more and more damaged at the bottom of the ocean. Some have suggested filling the wreck with ping pong balls to make it float, while others even considered injecting it with 180,000 tons of Vaseline. Another idea was to use 450,000 tons of liquid nitrogen to trap it in an iceberg that would float to the surface. But they eventually had to let go of all these potential strategies since the Titanic is way too fragile to ever be recovered. The Titanic may be one of the most interesting ships lying at the bottom of the ocean, at least in popular culture, but deep-sea divers have a lot of other stories to share. Planes also sometimes find their way to the bottom of the ocean. Deep-sea divers in Oahu, Hawaii, came across the wreckage of an F-4U Corsair plane. It seems to have crashed into the ocean in 1946, as it didn't have sufficient fuel. If you can dive deep enough, you might even stumble upon statues and lost artifacts, like those found in the world's only underwater archaeological park off the coast of Naples, Italy. It features the ruins of the ancient Roman city of Baia. The underwater statues found here are breathtaking, to say the least. In an ironic twist of events, some of the equipment we intended to use to get us to the moon was lost at the bottom of the sea for a very long time. But how did that happen? Beginning from the late 1960s and ending in the early 70s, many Apollo rockets were launched to orbit the Earth and the Moon. When reaching altitudes of about 38 miles, the first portion of the spacecraft, including the engines, needed to separate. People thought these components got destroyed or lost forever. But were they really? In 2012, a team of specialists discovered a bunch of rocket engines 14,000 feet off the coast of Florida. They have since gone through a 2-year renovation plan and are now on display at Seattle's Museum of Flight. Can you imagine stumbling upon a whole city underwater? Back in 2001, a lost city was discovered in the Gulf of Cambay, off the coast of India. Some archaeologists believe it to be the oldest city in history. By comparison, it's almost the size of Manhattan and features massive walls and even plazas. They stumbled upon pieces of sculpture, artwork, and even what looked like ancient wooden furniture, believed to date back up to 9,500 years ago, and 5,000 years older than any city previously discovered. Okay, how about an underwater river? I can't even imagine what that would look like, but some deep divers claim to have seen it south of Tulum, Mexico. Is that even possible? Well, not really, since the Cenote Angelita Cave is not a true river, but a very special type of optical illusion. It's formed by a halocline, meaning a cloud of hydrogen sulfide at the bottom of this underwater cave. Turns out you can actually swim right through this cloud, which makes you feel like you're swimming through a flowing body of water. Not all things discovered underwater are inanimate objects. Some of them are actually quite scary sea creatures. A jellyfish might not be on your list of things to look out for if you can avoid the stings. But this giant one, also known as a lion's mane jellyfish, is the largest known species of its kind. In all fairness, you'll only uncover it if you happen to dive into the waters of the Arctic, Northern Atlantic, and Northern Pacific Oceans. You surely won't miss it, since it stretches across 120 feet from the top to the bottom of its tentacles. When it comes to deep-sea diving, a lot of people are looking to discover some lost treasure. One diver was lucky enough to have hit the literal jackpot when he came upon nearly $1 million worth of treasure on the bottom of the seabed. That was back in 2015, when this lucky diver was swimming just off the coast of Florida. What did he find, you might ask? Well, about 51 gold coins, 40 feet of gold chain, and a rare single coin that was tailored for the King of Spain, Philip V. Speaking of people looking for lost treasures, divers also sometimes found pirate ships. They discovered one of these pirate shipwrecks in 2015 off the coast of Colombia. It dates back to the 18th century. The value of this forgotten ship was estimated to be between $4 billion and $17 billion, as it contained treasures, precious stones, gold, and countless other really valuable items. By comparison, a whole island in the Bahamas is up for grabs at $75 million. A computer is the last thing you'd ever expect to discover underwater, right? And this was no regular computer, but an ancient one. And yet, someone stumbled upon it between 1900 and 1901 on the spot of a shipwreck located off one Greek island. Researchers believe this weird stone contraption to be the earliest form of a computer. It was designed to serve many purposes, such as predicting astronomical positions and eclipses on the calendar. Since humanity lost most of the technology used back then, it was wonderful to rediscover it so many years later. It let us piece together many of the ancient Greeks' accomplishments. The computer is now at the National Archaeological Museum of Athens, should you ever want to check it out in person. This has to be one of the most mysterious places on Earth. It's called the Mariana Trench, and it's the deepest part of the Earth's oceans. We really don't know how deep it is, since it's so difficult to measure. But it's somewhere around 7 miles deep and 5 times longer than the Grand Canyon. They first studied this massive underwater hole back in 1875 using a weighted rope. Back in 2012, a Canadian film director named James Cameron reached the bottom of the trench in the submersible vessel Deep Sea Challenger. Some of the most bizarre creatures on the planet call this place their home, including the Dumbo octopus, the sea cucumber, and the goblin shark. The Mariana Trench took its name after the nearby Mariana Islands, which are named Las Marianas in honor of the Spanish Queen Mariana of Austria.
Question for you. Do you think Atlantis could be real? It remains as one of history's greatest mysteries. The legend began with Plato, all the way back in ancient Greece. The tale of a civilization that formed and prospered before our own. Atlantis was supposedly a highly technological society, much like the Mayans. But, as the legend says, due to the people's greed, they were punished by a flood that destroyed and submerged their cities. Different theories try to guess Atlantis' location. Some say it was in the Mediterranean Sea. Some say it's beneath the Bermuda Triangle. But, as science has shown us, Atlantis may be only an allegory for humankind. Today, you'll discover several amazing underwater cities that you have never heard of. They existed indeed and are not just a myth. We're taking you on an excursion to the underwater city of Baia, which is on the coast of Italy. Known as the Las Vegas of the Roman Empire, Baia was a resort city. The Roman elite traveled there for recreation. Imagine an open-air spa. That was Baia. You can visit the submerged town by scuba diving and get close to that perfectly preserved, magnificent Roman sculpture, a true underwater wonder. You can spot the crumbled temples and buildings through glass-bottom boats. This is a moss-covered museum in Claudio's Nymphaeum. To your left, you can see a collection of classical Greek statues. Swimming down the Via Herculeana, you'll arrive at Villa Aprotio. Villas are Italian-style houses, and here you can admire their original marble floors. Notice the black and white patterns and the astounding shapes they make. Next, you'll arrive at Portus Julius. Can you see the collapsing wall structures at the bottom of the seafloor? You'll see well-preserved columns and limestone floors. Behold the ruins of the thermal baths of Lacus. The remaining multicolored mosaics are something great to see. You'll see their orange, blue, and green tiles if you get close enough. At Pisoni's Villa Pila, you'll see 25 preserved Roman pillars. Notice the arches, the frescoes nearby, and the magnitude of this well-kept treasure. The city was located over natural volcanic vents, so there were hot springs to be used at will. People went there looking to have an excellent time. And when I say people, I mean some of the great Roman emperors we learn about in school: Nero, Cicero, Caesar. But around the 8th century, the city was sacked and the luxurious town was abandoned. Slowly, the water level rose and the city started to drown. You are on a summer vacation off the coast of Greece, 4 hours outside of Athens, in the Peloponnese Peninsula on Pavlo Petri. You dust off your snorkel and head for a free dive on a bright sunny day. Sometime into the dive, you start noticing patterns on the seabed. 13 feet below the surface, the outline of familiar objects starts to appear, one by one. As you continue swimming, what looks like the outline of an entire city emerges before your eyes. You wonder, how could water have taken the whole city? Rocks are perfectly aligned into what appears to be the foundation of a building. Nicholas Fleming, a British oceanographer on vacation in Greece, was the person that discovered Pavlo Petri. He was documenting the seafloor artifacts. The team found the site filled with pots, storage vessels, and tools. A quern stone, for instance, is a tool used for grinding grains and turning them into flour. Multiple amphoras, which were found then, indicate that this settlement dated back to the Bronze Age, 5,500 years ago, when people started living in towns. The settlement is believed to have lasted for over 2,400 years. Pavlo Petri is considered today the oldest submerged town yet found, and it's impressive that it wasn't a simple village. It was a vibrant port city with stone-built buildings, a marketplace, streets, and even squares. Let's continue our exploration and find secrets in other underwater cities. You are diving off the coast of the Ryukyu Islands. Pacific waters are far from smooth. There's a strong current pulling you into the deep sea. Suddenly, you see a huge structure thanks to the sunlight shining down on the seabed. At first, it looks like Machu Picchu's ruins across the globe in Peru. As you approach it, you slowly figure out its form. A pyramid-shaped structure, arches, staircases. It's something that could have easily been a palace or castle. Could this also be a sign of human activity? What you just saw is known today as the Yonaguni Monument. It also goes by the name of Japan's Atlantis. The entire monument is about the size of 5 football fields and the height of a 5-story building. Its most surprising feature is its expansive terraces that host large crowd gatherings. Explorers and scientists believe that Yonaguni dates back to 10,000 years ago. But whether it is a man-made structure or a natural formation is still under debate. For Japan's top marine geologist, Professor Masaki Kimura, Yonaguni is the heritage of a lost civilization. Kimura has dived into exploring the ruins over 100 times over the past 10 years. According to him, there are clear signs of human activity down there. The Triangle Pool, located on the monument's surface, is a triangle-shaped concave that is a historical symbol of water fountains in the region. There is also a giant turtle carved on the eastern side of the structure. And according to Kimura, turtles have an important cultural meaning. Several pieces of stone tools have been recovered from the site. Their estimated age dates back to 10,000 years ago. However, not all scientists are convinced of the same. For many, Yonaguni is the result of thousands of years of erosion. The fact that the monument is composed of one massive rock leads them to believe that it is not human-made. The defined edges and flat surfaces resemble a natural formation occurrence in Northern Ireland, known as Giant's Causeway. A series of interlocking basalt columns look like the ruins of a palace, but they were the result of volcanic activity in the region. Well, stay tuned for more underwater discoveries. The next stop on our voyage is one of today's most famous underwater cities that has turned into an underwater archaeological park. The city of Port Royal in Jamaica exists today only below the surface. But in 1692, it was one of the wealthiest cities in the Western Hemisphere. Port Royal was the center of the British Empire at the time, and an important trade city that attracted people from all over. It was also home to real-life pirates of the Caribbean. On the morning of June 7, 1692, the people of Port Royal met a different fate than they probably expected. The bars and restaurants beaming with life woke up shaking. People were taken out of bed with the power of a massive earthquake, estimated today at 7.5 on the Richter scale. One survivor says he saw the earth opening up and swallowing the town whole. What he said could be true, as the city was mainly built over sand. The ground sucked buildings, roads, and everyone above. Geysers erupted, and finally, waves as big as 10-story-high buildings hit the city. About 33 acres of the city disappeared underwater, and amazingly, most of its 17th century remains lie in good condition under 40 feet of water. In the ruins, archaeologists have found taverns, storage rooms, kitchens, and recreational buildings used for diverse purposes. You can see a grand lion statue, a submerged bridge, and many picturesque arches. Now, do you fancy a trip to India? Just outside its coast lies another sunken marvel. A site known as the Lost City of Cambay is located on the Gulf of a similar name. It remained hidden until 2001, when the National Institute of Ocean Technology did a routine water assessment. With sonar technology, which sends a wave of sound to the bottom of the sea, they found something far beneath the surface. Images showed well-defined geometric shapes spread along a 5-mile stretch. The remains found dated to more than 9,500 years ago, meaning that this civilization was lost at around the end of the Ice Age. Debris recovered from the site included construction material, pottery, beads, sculptures, and even bones. Scientists argue whether these artifacts are indeed from the site, but if they truly are, then the lost city of Cambay would be the oldest civilization in the world.
Imagine that it's the year 2025, and our planet has completely changed. Rising sea levels, extreme weather, and the ocean becoming more and more acidic are just some of the problems people have been dealing with for years. But in one of the world's largest coastal cities, the situation has become too serious. It was a sunny day in June when a massive earthquake shook the city to its core. The ground beneath people's feet heaved and shook, and buildings swayed dangerously. People ran through the streets in panic, trying to find safety. But as soon as the ground settled, the inhabitants of the city realized the real danger. A wall of water, almost 100 feet high, was rushing toward the city, propelled by the force of the earthquake. The tsunami hit the city with unimaginable force. Entire neighborhoods were wiped out, and thousands of people lost their lives. But here's where things get interesting. In the aftermath of the disaster, the city's authorities realized that they couldn't just rebuild the city as it was before. They needed to be better prepared for the next potential disaster. And so they came up with an incredibly ambitious project to build an underwater city. The goal was to create a self-sufficient, sustainable city beneath the ocean's surface that could withstand any natural disaster. The underwater city would be powered by renewable energy, using tidal power and underwater solar panels. It would be designed to withstand extreme weather and would have its own emergency response systems. The project attracted some of the world's top scientists, engineers, and architects. They worked tirelessly to design the city and carefully considered every aspect of the project. The underwater city would have everything that a typical city had, from schools and hospitals to stores and restaurants. There would be underwater farms where fish and other marine creatures could grow. The city would even have its transportation system, advanced submarines, and underwater tunnels connecting different parts of the city. The project became a shining beacon of hope for people. It showed that even in the face of disaster, we could come together to create something amazing. But as time went on, the project no longer seemed so perfect. The cost of the project turned out to be higher than planned. There were also concerns about how long such a project would exist. After all, the ocean is very unpredictable. And still, the team of scientists and engineers never gave up. After years of trial and error, they finally created the perfect underwater city, a marvel of engineering, a self-contained ecosystem that could sustain people indefinitely. The buildings were constructed from a material that could withstand the immense pressure at the bottom of the ocean, and the city itself was powered by a network of advanced hydroelectric turbines. It wasn't long before the first wave of colonists arrived at the underwater city. There were different people in this group, and each of them had their own reasons for choosing to live in this new world beneath the waves. Some were adventurers seeking a new world to explore, while others were hoping to escape natural disasters raging on dry land. But despite their differences, all these people shared a common goal: to build a new society, one that was in harmony with the natural world. The underwater city flourished, and new discoveries were made every day. The colonists developed new technologies and ways to tame the power of the ocean. They learned to farm the sea and started cultivating underwater gardens that provided them with a steady food supply. But living underwater was challenging. People felt isolated and even claustrophobic. The situation came to a head when a group of activists started to protest against the city's expansion plans. They argued that the underwater city was a threat to the environment it was meant to protect, and that the colonists should focus on reducing their impact on the delicate underwater life. The protests sparked a heated debate among the colonists. Some of them argued that the survival of the city depended on its growth and expansion. Others claimed that the city needed to prioritize the protection of the environment above all else. In the end, a compromise was reached. The city would continue to expand, but the main priority would be sustainability and a responsible attitude to nature. The colonists would do their best to reduce their impact on the environment by using new technologies and following strict conservation rules. And they would also remember the importance of protecting the ocean and its fragile ecosystem. Years went by, and the underwater city continued to thrive. New generations of colonists were born, and they grew up in a world entirely different from the one their ancestors had known. They never saw the world on the surface, but appreciated the beauty and complexity of the underwater world they called home. And as the years passed, the city became a symbol of hope for a world struggling with the devastating effects of climate change. It showed that despite all difficulties, people could come together to create a better world. It is a reminder that the future is not set in stone and that we can build it sustainably and in harmony with the natural world.
Scientists discovered something Atlantis-like near Australia. There used to be an entire continent that's now underwater. Here's what happened to it. Around 70,000 years ago, during the last ice age, there was a huge landmass called Sahul. It was located in the southwestern Pacific Ocean. This ancient supercontinent connected what we now know as Australia, New Guinea, Tasmania, and the Aru Islands into one giant piece of land. Imagine lush tropical rainforests surrounded by beautiful mountains. Sahul's tallest mountains were in the New Guinea highlands, with peaks reaching over 13,000 feet. This beautiful place was home to a variety of unique animals, most of which were pouched creatures. But back then, they weren't just koalas and kangaroos. Sahul was filled with different types of grazers, burrowers, scavengers, and predators. It was home to a huge diprotodon, a powerful hunter Thiosolio, and a horrifying Megalania, a creature that's much larger than any living lizard today. It was a unique place because the rest of the world was filled with placental animals at the time, like wolves, elephants, and humans. In Sahul, the only normal mammals were bats and rodents. But not all its parts were the same. The Timor, Arafura, and Carpentaria regions were covered by hot savanna and dry forests. It looked kinda like modern Australia, hot air deserts with scrubland, steppe, and temperate forests along the eastern coast. Back then, people were migrating all across the world. They made an incredible journey from Southeast Asia to Sahul and first arrived here from 60 to 45,000 years ago. They mostly traveled by foot and crossed the sea using bamboo rafts and simple boats. They came there from an ancient landmass called Sunda, which includes parts of Southeast Asia. They traveled across a series of islands known as Wallachia and eventually spread across Sahul. And it wasn't a small journey. Sahul was huge, around 4.1 million square miles. That's bigger than the USA or Canada. It stretched from the equator to around the southern part of New Zealand. So they arrived in what is now Australia and became Australia's first people. Scientists think that Sahul had a population of 500,000. We've discovered cave paintings that date back around 40,000 years. It's a hunting scene depicting an anoa, or miniature buffalo, facing figures of humans and animals. Researchers are trying to figure out how these early settlers moved across Sahul and where we might find archaeological evidence of their journey. To do this, they created a landscape evolution model. The simulation showed how Sahul changed between 75,000 and 35,000 years ago. It showed potential migration routes and archaeological sites. Humans likely traveled along coastlines and rivers. But how did Sahul get submerged off the coast of Australia, similar to the mythical Atlantis? During the last ice age, much of the Earth's water was locked up in large ice sheets and glaciers. The sea levels were much lower than they are today. After that, the global temperatures increased. The ice sheets melted and the sea levels rose, flooding the land bridges that once connected different parts of Sahul together. About 8,000 years ago, New Guinea separated from mainland Australia, and then, about 6,000 years ago, Tasmania did the same. We still can explore the underwater parts of Sahul thanks to new technology. Divers explore and collect samples directly from the ocean floor. Underwater drones can go to places that are too deep or dangerous for humans to explore. And with sonar mapping, scientists use sound waves to create maps of the ocean floor. It's like using an echo to see what's underwater. The sound waves bounce off the seabed and come back, helping us create a picture of what it looks like. Deep underwater, archaeologists have found stone tools and other artifacts. They also discovered fossils of animals like Diprotodon and Thylasolio. By studying the underwater terrain of Sahul, they learned about the ancient rivers, lakes, and coastlines that existed during the Ice Age. But Sahul isn't the only underwater continent. Sahul isn't the only hidden gem of Southeast Asia. Take Sundaland, a place made up of Sumatra, Java, Borneo, and some other islands. This place was crazy huge during the Ice Age, but now almost fully underwater. Almost, but not entirely. The parts above the ocean are teeming with life. If you like birds, check this place out. It has almost a fifth of the world's bird species. You can spot colorful birds like the Java hawk eagle and the Bali starling among the lush forests. It's also a home to a fourth of Earth's fish species. Sundaland's waters are a haven for marine life, even the most exotic animals like the Asian arowanas. It's also a treasure trove of flowers. That's where you can find Rafflesia and Titan arum, the world's largest flowers. This makes it very similar to Zealandia. Zealandia is a long, narrow piece of land about half the size of Australia. It broke from Antarctica about 100 million years ago. Just like Sundaland, it isn't fully underwater. 7% of it stayed above sea level. This sticking out little piece is what we now call New Zealand, along with Stewart Island and some smaller islands. These pieces of Zealandia are lush and warm. They're packed with volcanoes, mountain ranges, beautiful natural geysers, and hot springs. Local people, Maori, use these hot springs for cooking. People place corn, eggs, and vegetables in baskets and lower them directly in the hot springs. Sometimes they cook food in a pit oven using heated rocks. Another hidden world is known as Argoland. This mysterious landmass was once part of Australia, back when dinosaurs chilled around. It drove scientists crazy for decades. They knew it existed because it left a huge stretch on the ancient seafloor, the Argo Abyssal Plain. About 155 million years ago, it broke off from Australia, saying bye-bye. The continent drifted somewhere north, and when it reached Southeast Asia, it just vanished. Scientists had no idea where it went, but recently they finally found its remains. Turns out, poor Argoland's lower parts started drowning into the Sunda Trench, a horrifyingly deep oceanic pit. The Earth's crust sunk into the mantle. Meanwhile, the upper parts of Argoland were pushed upward, grabbing the younger rocks on land. Because of this, Argoland broke apart into a bunch of smaller pieces. These pieces formed parts of Borneo, Java, Sulawesi, and other regions. The remains are buried under Indonesia and Myanmar. Imagine a colossal landmass the size of Greenland, Greater Adria. Its journey began about 240 million years ago when it broke away from the supercontinent Gondwana. It started moving north, and after 100 million years of enjoying the warm seas, it suddenly crashed into Europe and shattered into pieces. Most of these pieces went deep into the Earth's mantle, but some were scraped off and became part of mountain ranges like the Alps. Today, the remnants of Greater Adria are scattered across more than 30 countries, from Spain to Iran. That's why they're hard to look for. Seychelles was also once part of Gondwana. Yep, these idyllic islands are sitting atop of the ancient continent. We know a lot about it because of its fascinating granite outcrops. 100 years ago, Alfred Wegener discovered continental drift, but no one believed him. These granite outcrops helped him prove that he's not crazy and that tectonic plates really are moving. The Seychelles broke off from India and Madagascar and eventually became a sad loner in the Indian Ocean. This probably happened because of some insanely active volcanoes in the Deccan Traps. But now, the islands are home to unique species both on land and in the coral reefs nearby. Mauritius broke off from India after the dinosaur wiping. Along its journey, it stretched into a long ribbon-like shape and also broke into pieces. Now it's all scattered beneath the Indian Ocean. Scientists stumbled upon this lost land by studying tiny ancient crystals called zircons. These zircons are like time capsules. They date back an astonishing 660 million to 2 billion years. That's even older than Mauritius itself. These ancient crystals hinted that there's another Atlantis somewhere nearby. Turns out there are hidden continents all around the world, and maybe we'll discover more of them in the future.